Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the SBA Paycheck Protection Program 2021 Relaunch Update webinar, the first in our Economic Relief Act webinar series. This webinar provides an overview of updates on recent changes and enhancements to the PPP program directly from the U.S. Small Business Administration, North Carolina District Office. I'm Bob Weston, Director of the SBTDC Statewide COVID-19 Business Recovery and Resiliency Program, a CARES Act funded initiative expanding the Small Business and Technology Development Center's capacity to assist businesses in successfully navigating the COVID-19 crisis. Business resiliency counselors are embedded with our 10 SBTDC regional centers across the state and hosted by our UNC system campuses with 16 offices serving all 100 North Carolina counties. I'd like to introduce Byron Hicks, Executive State Director of the SBTDC, to kick off the program and introduce Mike Ariola, Acting District Director of the U.S. Small Business Administration's North Carolina District Office.
Great, thank you, Bob. I appreciate the introduction. You did a good job covering the SBTDC, the Small Business and Technology Development Center. We're excited to be helping host this program today, and even more excited to have our partners from the Small Business Administration team to help us and help you learn more about the PPP opportunities that are available to small businesses in North Carolina. And I'd like to introduce Mike Ariola, as Bob said, the Acting District Director of the SBA in North Carolina. And Mike, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you go from there and introduce your team. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Byron. And thank you, Bob, also for hosting us for this very important session for our folks in North Carolina. Joining me today are Karen Hoskins, our lead lender relations specialist, as well as Walter Lara Figueroa, a lender relations specialist, and they're going to help field some of the questions that you all might have today. I am Mike Ariola. I'm the Acting District Director for the Small Business Administration based in Charlotte. That's where our district office is located. But in addition to our district office, we also have one-person satellite offices in Asheville, Raleigh, and Wilmington to serve our communities in those areas. And just by way of a quick overview, the SBA is a U.S. government agency. We were formed in 1953 to help Americans start, develop, and grow their small businesses. And we do that through a number of programs, including capital access, which you're going to hear about today. We've got a number of government contracting and procurement programs available to help small businesses tap into the federal marketplace. And we have a number of counseling and training programs, including partners that we sponsor, such as the SBTDC, a very valued partner of ours throughout the state of North Carolina. So let's go ahead and go to the slide, if you don't mind. All right, thanks. So we're going to cover a couple of things today. Next slide, please. Yeah, we're going to talk about where we are today, some key dates that have already kicked in, and some key dates yet to occur. We're going to talk a little bit about first draw and second draw PPP loans, and I'll mention the distinction between those. I'm also going to give a quick update on the forgiveness process. And finally, we're going to talk about what to do now and some additional resources for assistance. Next slide. So where are we today? So Congress approved the legislation, and President Trump signed it several weeks ago. And the whole intention of this round of PPP funding is to try to deliver capital to underserved communities and minority folks, such as women, veterans, etc. And as a tactic in order to deliver that, we initially opened up PPP loan applications to these community financial institutions first, as of January 11th. And a community financial institution can be CDFI, it can be a minority deposit institution, it could be qualified credit unions, and that sort of thing. And so we opened it up to those groups of lenders first to try to serve underserved communities. Another thing that we did is we rolled out our lender, or I should say, retooled our lender match tool so that individuals can try to locate a lender to get their PPP loan. I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. And finally, we're continuing to provide public outreach sessions such as these in order to reach small business owners and other qualified applicants throughout the state of North Carolina. Next slide, please. Okay, so here are some key dates that have already kicked in. As I mentioned briefly, on January 11th, our SBA's PPP portal opened up to community financial institutions to help folks get their first draw of PPP loans. A first draw borrower is one that is getting a PPP loan for the first time with this current round of funding. A second draw PPP borrower is one that is getting its second PPP loan through this current round. In other words, they got a PPP loan last time around and they're looking to get another one this time. And our portal opened up for those applications through CFIs on January 13th. On January 15th, last Friday, the portal opened up for both of those types of borrowers for lending institutions with $1 billion or less in assets. So all of this was part of our intention to try to enable small businesses that are owned by minorities and other underserved communities to get first crack at applying for a PPP loan. And then as of January 19th, 2 days ago, all lending institutions can now submit their applications to SBA for their first and second draw loan applications. As of March 31st, all PPP applications must be submitted. Next slide. Okay, so as I mentioned briefly, a first draw loan, a PPP loan, is one that they're getting for the first time with this round. Okay, Pbp loan eligibility includes those that were eligible last time around, but there are some additional types of entities that are now eligible, and I'll go through those in just a second. Covered eligible expenses are expanded. Okay, this is how this works. Last year we said that in order to get your PPP loan fully forgiven, you have to have a certain percentage of payroll expenses included in your loan amount, and then the rest can be used for operating expenses such as mortgage or rent, utilities, and transportation expenses. This time around, with the current funding, we've expanded that a lot more, and I think a lot of our small businesses are going to be happy about what other expenses are now covered. So as of now, at least 60% of your PPP loan must be used for payroll, and the rest can be used for all those expenses that I mentioned earlier, which is to say mortgage or rent, utilities, transportation expenses. But you can also add the following expenses. If you incurred any expenses to purchase personal protective equipment for your staff and for your customers, those can be included. If your business sustained damage as a result of civil disobedience last year, any expenses that your business incurred as a result of repairing that damage can also be folded into the mix. So those two new types of expenses are now eligible. So now, as long as you provide for payroll, those mortgage, rent, utilities, transportation expenses, plus the new ones, any civil disobedience damage, and any PPE or other sorts of expenses that you incurred in order to make your business compliant with federal safety and health guidelines, all of those rolled up together can allow your loan to be fully forgiven by the SBA. So it's a very, very important new addition for our new round of PPP. In addition, the covered period to use those PPP loan proceeds can be any time between 8 and 24 weeks after the loan is dispersed. So you can include those expenses, 8, 9, 10, 23, 24 weeks after the loan has been dispersed. And certain borrowers, under very limited circumstances, certain borrowers may request an increase to their original PPP loan amount. And additional guidance as to what kinds of borrowers are eligible is available on our website. I'll talk about that towards the end of this presentation. The key thing is that folks need to apply on or before March 31st or until congressional appropriations expire. Next slide, please. Okay, so First draw PPP loan applicants have to comply with Sba Size Standards. Broadly speaking, that means no more than 500 employees, or you comply with Sba Size Standards. And Sba Size Standards vary from industry to industry. For example, we say that if you're generally speaking, if you're a manufacturer, we say that you're a small business if you have no more than 500 employees. Sometimes it can be either the number of employees or the dollar amount of revenues. It all kind of depends upon the industry that you're in. But there is at least one specific type of manufacturer where the maximum number of employees is 750, which is a little bit higher than the 500 employee. Because you would still fall under that size standard, you would still be eligible to apply. So 500 employees or the maximum size standard that is applicable to your type of enterprise. Those types of entities that were eligible last time around are still eligible. So business entities of all kinds, partnerships, corporations, etc., sole proprietorships, independent contractors, 501c3s, 501c19s, and tribal type of businesses. All of those are still eligible. However, this time, there are a number of newly eligible types of organizations that can take advantage of a PPP loan. And those include housing cooperatives, destination marketing organizations, certain 501c6 organizations, such as chambers of commerce, and eligible news organizations as well. That part about 501c6 organizations, such as chambers of commerce, that particular eligible type of business, we got a lot of demand and a lot of inquiries from the chambers of commerce throughout the state with which the SBA works, and I'm gratified to see that we're now including them as eligible applicants for a PPP loan. Next slide. Okay, so what is a second draw PPP loan? For second draw PPP borrowers, the restrictions are a little bit tighter this time around because we want to make sure, first of all, by opening up the portal to community financial institutions, first of all, we wanted to make sure that minority and underserved borrowers have an opportunity to apply, but also we needed to ensure that adequate funds are available for those that didn't get a PPP loan the first time around. Hence, if you're a second-time borrower with this round of PPP funding, it's important that SBA establish certain restrictions on that. I'm going to cover the thing about reduction in gross receipts as well as 300 employees later on, but for now, the maximum loan amount for a second PPP loan is 2.5 times the average monthly 2019 or 2020 payroll costs, up to $2 million. So there's a restriction there in terms of the loan amount. Before it was 10 million, now it's a maximum of 2 million. However, if your industry happens to have a North American Industrial Classification System code beginning with the number 72, and typically that means accommodation and food services, your maximum loan amount for a second draw could be 3.5 times the average monthly 2019 or 2020 payroll costs, up to 2 million. So a little bit of flexibility for those sectors because they've been very hard hit as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And second draw applicants must submit the information on SBA Form 2483 SD. Next slide, please. Okay, so in order to be eligible again for second draw PPP loan eligibility, I want to hammer home a couple of points. First of all, you have to have no more than 300 employees, okay? For first draw, we said 500 or the maximum SBA standard, size standard. This time we're saying we have to make sure that you have no more than 300 employees. We also need to make sure that you have used or will use your first draw PPP loan from last year only for eligible expenses before the PPP second draw loan is disbursed. Key verbiage there is disbursed. And finally, here's the key thing that I believe is kind of throwing some people off. As a second draw PPP borrower, you need to demonstrate at least a 25% reduction in gross receipts between comparable quarters in 2019 and 2020. What does that mean? What you would do is you would compare apples to apples. My first quarter, as an example, first quarter 2019 versus my first quarter 2020, If I can show and I can evidence at least a 25% reduction in gross receipts from that quarter in 29 to 2020, I can meet that eligibility criteria. But it has to be an apples to apples comparison, either first quarter to first quarter or second quarter to second quarter or third quarter to third quarter, etc. Failing that, you can actually compare your entire year 2019 to 2020. And if the entire year can demonstrate at least a 25% reduction in gross receipts, you would also meet that eligibility criteria. One of the things that comes up is, how do I demonstrate that? Well, we came up with SBA guidance on that very recently. And one way to do that would be to furnish to your lender a set of internally prepared company financial statements that show that quarterly reduction. Make sure that you sign it, certified and true and correct by yourself as the borrower, and initial every page. That would be acceptable. I think in an ideal world, I believe our regulations say that audited quarterly financial statements is also acceptable. Not sure how many people actually do audited quarterly statements, because those are pretty expensive. But if those are available through your company, to your company, you're welcome to use those as well. Recall that a moment ago I said, failing that ability to show from quarter to quarter that 25% reduction, you can use the whole year, 2019 versus 2020, and you can sort of evidence a 25% drop in gross receipts from 2019 to 2020. How would you demonstrate that? Our recommended way of demonstrating that is to fill out your tax returns for 2020 and compare that to what you reported for 2019. We're not going to require you right this minute to file those tax returns, 2020 tax returns with the IRS, but our expectation is eventually when you do file those 2020 tax returns with the IRS, make sure that there is no discrepancy between what you're reporting to the bank and what you're reporting to the IRS. So that could work as well. Next slide, please. Okay, and I want to talk just a little bit about the PPP loan forgiveness by way of an update. Remember that you do not apply for forgiveness of your PPP loan to SBA, but rather you make your application through your lender, and then the lender submits their borrower forgiveness decision to us for final review. A couple of updates as a result of the Economic Aid Act, and these are very much welcome. We're hearing from the small business community. And the first is that if you got an economic injury disaster loan advance, before, you would have to deduct that from your forgiveness amount. And as a result of that, you would have to pay the balance to the bank, and the bank would then have, a loan of whatever amount on their books for you to repay. As a result of the Economic Aid Act, however, economic injury disaster loan or EIDL advances are no longer deducted from that forgiveness payment. So in other words, if you got an EIDL advance first time around, you're not going to get penalized when it comes time to forgiveness. It's still, a grant from the government for which you are not going to be penalized when it comes time for forgiveness. Okay, so that's a very good development that we saw that's going to be benefiting our small businesses. Another terrific benefit as a result of the Economic Aid Act has to do with tax implications of a PPP loan. And one thing to recognize is that forgiven PPP loans are not taxable income to the business. So it's a very important benefit for our small business owner. And secondarily, but no less important, is that the expenses that you paid with your PPP loan funds, guess what? They are now tax deductible. There was some ambiguity as to whether or not you could deduct that, or if you could leave that out of your tax deduction for IRS reporting purposes. Well, turns out that as a result of the Economic Aid Act, those expenses paid for with PPP loan funds are in fact tax deductible. And you can check out irs.gov for further details should you desire to do that. In addition, these expanded forgivable expenses that I talked about, they are permissible for any PPP loan not already forgiven. All right, that's an important point to make note of. And finally, we are going to come up very shortly with a simplified forgiveness application for PPP loans of $150,000 and under. We very broadly speaking, SBA and your elected representatives heard a lot of feedback from the lending community, as well as from our small business owners. And this is just another effort of ours to make the process of getting and then getting forgiveness on a PPP loan a lot more streamlined and user-friendly. So next slide, please. So what do you do now? And are there any resources to help? Well, sure. I think the first rule of thumb that I'm going to say is to contact your lender, particularly if you are a second draw PPP borrower this time, because your lender that gave you your first PPP loan already has a file on you. And I'm hearing from a number of lenders out there that they have online systems where you go on their website, you make your application for the PPP loan. Well, it turns out that a lot of lenders still have your information on their system, so that if you go back and reapply, a lot of the fields on their application form are going to pre-populate if you do things like key in your EIN number, your SS number, that sort of thing. So that's a terrific time saver. So see your first lender, the one where you got your first PPP from, for your additional application. You don't have to, but I think it'll make it a lot easier and more convenient on you because your file information is already there. If you're a first draw PPP borrower, or if you want to seek out another lender, if you're a second draw PPP borrower, you can find one on the SBA's lender match tool. That's sba.gov/lender match. It's sort of like a match.com to connect the small business applicant with the lender in your area. So that's a very convenient tool for you all to use. And finally, for all up-to-date information, documents, forms, etc., go to sba.gov/ppp, and we're updating that as additional clarification is received. Last time around, we put up a set of FAQs for folks to take a look at with our first round of PPP. I suspect we'll probably end up doing the same because there are some lingering questions that require some clarity that I believe SBA is going to have to address in a set of FAQs. So just by way of clarification here, I suspect that if we can't answer your question right here and now, chances are that's going to be covered in a set of FAQs to come out very shortly. And finally, additional resources that are available for folks, by all means, make use of the SBTDC throughout the state. Wherever there is a business school at a University of North Carolina campus, you'll find an SBTDC, but also outside of those business schools, you will quite likely find a subcenter in an urban area where there's an SBTDC presence available to assist you. In addition, there are other resources that I'd like to turn to, and maybe I'll save that for the next slide. But for now, let me also talk about our Sba E Newsletter, which everybody is welcome to sign up for. That way you can get notifications of seminars such as the one we're having today, and you can get fully up to date on the goings on with our new COVID assistance programs and other things that the SBA North Carolina District Office has to offer. So please do sign up for our newsletter. And you can also follow us on Twitter. Also, our main line for assistance is listed there, as is our Charlotte inbox, nc@sba.gov. So those are the ways in which folks can get a hold of us. Next slide, please. Okay, was there a slide on our resource partners? Yeah, here, this is the one I wanted to talk about. Yeah, there is the SBTDC, which I mentioned just a moment ago. In addition to the SBTDC, the other resource partners that the SBA either sponsors or works very closely with include the 4 women's business centers, each independently run. There's one in Charlotte, there's one in Durham, there's one in Fayetteville, there's one in Asheville. There's a 5th one that was recently announced, and we're working to get that one fully up and running, and that one will be at Winston-Salem State. In addition to that, we have just almost a dozen chapters of SCORE, America's Counselors to Small Business, which are available for assistance. There is also the Veterans Business Outreach Center based at Fayetteville State University to help our veteran population. And finally, a group of small business service providers that is not sponsored by the SBA, yet we do a lot of very close collaborative work, are the 58 small business centers housed at the various North Carolina community colleges. So by all means, do search these folks out and visit sba.gov/NC, which is the North Carolina homepage, for individual partner contact information. I'm sure they'd love to hear from you. And so with that, Bob, do we want to go ahead and open it up for questions? Is there a chat box perhaps? Oh, here it is.
Yes, Mike, we have the Q&A panel, and I'm going to stop the share so people can see you.
Okay. Right, thank you. Thank you so much, Bob. And I'll just kind of read out some of these questions, and I'll call on either Walter or Karen as well to help fill some of these questions. And if you'll give me just a second here. Okay. First question is, can the PBP be used to pay necessary vendors? That is cost of goods sold. Walter, do you have any inkling on that one?
What are they referring to as the cost of goods sold? Like what type of cost of goods sold?
Can it be used to pay necessary vendors?
That I'd have to check. That you cannot pay necessary vendors.
I'm not aware, Mike. I'm not aware of that being allowed, but we can double check that.
Yeah. I didn't see vendors as being eligible accounts or costs to pay. All I'm saying is expenses such as mortgage, rent, utilities, transportation, and the new ones, including the cost of PPE supplies and the cost of making your business compliant with federal safety and health guidelines, plus repairing any damage incurred as a result of civil disobedience. For example, they broke your windows, they spray painted your storefront, that sort of thing. Those are the only ones that come to mind. And honestly, if I kind of recall all of that mix, I don't see anything about paying necessary vendors.
Correct.
Unless one of your necessary vendors happens to be one of those that help to repair the windows or, the spray painting different, that kind of thing. Next question. What about a business that started in January 2020 and has been severely impacted by COVID-19 restrictions? Any thoughts on that, Walter or Karen?
Wait, what date did you say? I'm sorry, February 15th, the business needs to have been established by February 15th of 2020.
Yeah, right.
I think that might answer it.
Yeah. So that would answer that question. Obviously, that would be for a first draw PPP loan, right? Because second draw, they have to show the percentage drop in gross receipts, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So yes, but for first draw, right? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. The next question is: once the bank has passed the PPP forgiveness application onto SBA, what is the expected time frame for notification of forgiveness? Any thoughts on that?
Would you repeat that? I was still thinking about the other question. I apologize.
Sure. Yeah, no problem. So once the bank has passed the PPP forgiveness application over to SBA, what's the expected time frame for notification of forgiveness?
No, it's the regulations gives SBA 90 days to decision it once SBA has received it.
Okay, thank you. Here we go. To calculate 25% drop, can we compare receipts in Q1 to Q2? Whoops, sorry. My thing is sort of fidgeting around. Here we go. To calculate 25% drop, can we compare receipts in Q1 to Q2 2020? The reason is we opened newly in Q4 2019 and don't have year-over-year quarterly comparisons. The answer is no, and that is, remember, this is for a second draw application. You have to evidence that 25% drop, and it has to be apples to apples. Q1 2019, Q1 2020, Q2 2019 to Q2 2020, or the whole year. Okay. Is there any forgiveness for idle loans? No, there is not. EIDL, Economic Injury Disaster Loan, is a direct loan from the SBA. That is a completely separate program from PPP. How do nonprofits demonstrate reduction in gross receipts? Our revenue is all grants and donations. Interesting. Any thoughts on that, Walter?
On that, they would just submit it to the lender, and then they would determine the gross receipts based on the nonprofit situation, because obviously they're not doing tax returns.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if I understand this question correctly, there, you don't generate gross receipts in the way of sales or revenue, but if your revenue is donations and such, I would tend to think that perhaps that would be how you would do that. Karen, what do you think?
I can
go ahead.
Go ahead, Walter.
So for nonprofits organizations, you should really check with your tax advisor, but it would be based on the SBA guidance that we received from Treasury. It is based on, for nonprofit organizations, you would use IRS Form 990 Easy, and you would do the sums of the lines 5B, 6C, and 7B and 9B of Part 1. So I'd really just have your, accounting person look at that, and your lender is also going to help you, but you would use the IRS Form 990 Easy for nonprofit organization, and from there they're going to decipher the course.
Okay, great, thank you. Yeah. Here's one. Are 1099 employees included in payroll?
No,
because payroll counts for the 941s, and 1099s do not. We do not issue a 941 for 1099 employees.
But contractors can file. They too can apply for a PPP loan.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Our fiscal year is July to June. Is the comparison for the 2019 and 2020 quarters/year on a calendar basis?
I think just as long as the quarters match, doesn't matter what they're, to me, businesses are going to have different start dates. So it would just be still whatever your first quarter is for 19, match it to your first quarter 2020.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing that I saw though in the regulations is it does not specifically say calendar year or, has to be, the calendar year up until December 31st of 2019 versus 2020. It doesn't specifically say that. And I would be inclined to say that whatever your fiscal year is, whether that ends in June or September, that would be an appropriate year, not calendar year, but year in which to compare. Agree? That makes sense, yes?
I agree. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, we have received, next questions, we have received forgiveness already for our first round PPP. We then learned of the forgiveness of the EIDL advance. Will we still be able to have the advance forgiven?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It will go to the lender that will apply it properly.
Yeah, this is a very important point. Yeah, for those that got their EIDL advance deducted from your forgiveness application to the bank as a result of the first round, guess what? As a result of this new law that says the EIDL advance is no longer to be deducted, you will be made whole. And how that works is SBA is going to make a wire transfer directly to the bank to pay off your loan. So basically, just sit tight. You don't have to do anything. SBA is already working on the mechanics to get those payments in order to make you whole. So don't do anything. Don't pay it. Don't pay that EIDL advance thing off. Just sit tight. SBA will take care of that. Okay. Next question, for annual forgiveness, what line on Schedule C will be looked at for gross receipts? Walter, do you know that one? Yeah.
I gotta. It depends how you're structured, though. So
yeah.
It varies by, so for Schedule Cs, self-employment, it would be the sum of line 4 and line 7. Self-employment farmers would be Schedule Fs. Partnerships would be the sum of lines 2 and 8. The IRS 1060. So, and then for corporations to be the 120S, and for C Corps would be the 120 form.
Yeah, that's questions quite in the weeds. Okay, another question: can the second draw of the PPP funds be forgivable if the first draw was forgivable?
Well, again, it's going to have to be used for the proper eligible uses. That's going to determine the forgiveness for the second draw. Again, there's going to be the guidelines that it be used, 60% or more for payroll, et cetera.
Yeah. Okay. And next question is, if we get PPP funds and the government shuts our business down, sorry, my Q&A box is jumping around a little bit. Yeah, I think as more questions are added, the thing is jumping around. Forgive me. Okay, here we go. If we get PPP funds and the government shuts our business down and we end up laying people off after we have exhausted the PPP funds, is there a penalty? Yeah.
No, as long as you paid your employees during your covered period, the proper percentage, and then if something comes up and after the covered period, you have to lay somebody off. I think that should be fine, Mike.
Yeah,
that's actually covered under Safe Harbor. I'm sorry, that's actually covered under Safe Harbor because it wasn't the businesses doing. It was like they were complying with government health department rules, whatever those rules may be.
Yeah, and just Karen, you mentioned covered period. Let's kind of give a complete definition of what that means and what the 8 versus 24 means, just for the benefit of our audience. Do you want to talk about the covered period, what exactly that represents?
Well, sure. I mean, that's your period of time that you're going to be paying your employees or using the funds to pay your interest portion of your mortgage, various things like that. And you're going to either, you're going to definitely use at least 8 weeks to do that. Many businesses prefer to spread it over the 24 weeks to have a longer period of time to be paying employees, that type of thing. But with the way we have it set up now, you can use any time period between the 8 and the 24 weeks if you get it used up in 10 weeks, 12 weeks. So, it's really what's going to work best for your business structure.
Okay, all right. Thank you. We received an EIDL loan during the first round. The funds have not yet been used. Will we still be eligible for a second round of PPP? And will these funds be forgiven fully if used properly? Let me say that again. We received an EIDL during the first round. Well, actually, EIDL is still in place. There is no first round.
Right.
The funds have not yet been used. Okay, so it's an undisbursed loan. Will we still be eligible for a second round of PPP? Will these funds be? Here's the thing. Try not to conflate the economic injury disaster loan, which is a totally separate thing from PPP. PPP loans, you apply through the bank, and then the bank gets a 100% guarantee. You can get it fully forgiven. Economic injury disaster loan, EIDL, that's a direct loan from SBA. It's got a 30-year term, very low rates of interest. That one is not to be forgiven. So please do not conflate the two programs. Really, the EIDL, really for the most part, has no bearing on PPP. It used to, as far as the EIDL advance goes, but that you're not going to get penalized for this time around. So as long as your economic injury disaster loan is used for legitimate eligible purposes, you should be fine to apply for PPP. Now, this inquirer asks, specifically about second round of PPP. Doesn't apply. You need to ensure that you're eligible for, whether it's a first round PPP or you're a second time borrower for the PPP second draw this time around. Okay. Another question. Who can help me determine if my entity is in North American Industrial Classification System 72 category? Okay, that's easy. Write this down. It's www.sba.gov/size, and that will take you to the website for Sba Size Standards. You can pick a number of options. I like to go to the PDF version of the NAICS codes, and basically it has a couple of columns. It has all the NAICS codes and the description of the industry and the size standard. That's how you could locate whether or not your entity is in the 72 category. Just use like a word search of whatever your industry is on, or alternatively, take a look at all the 72 category names, and that should help you. Next question, did you mention that for PPP forgiveness, the EIDL grants that we've received will not be deducted from the forgiveness amount? That is correct. That is correct. Whereas before, we used to say, oh, you need to deduct the EIDL advance from your PPP forgiveness, and that left you with a loan balance that you had to pay back to the bank. That no longer applies. In other words, you won't be penalized for having taken advantage of an EIDL advance. You just, get the money and take it and spend it with our best wishes. You do not get penalized when it comes to forgiveness. You don't have to deduct that. In other words, whatever you took the PPP loan out for, you should expect to be forgiven for that in full, as long as you made sure that 60% was for payroll and the other 40% was used for those eligible expenses, plus the new ones that I talked about. Other than that, you should be good to go in terms of realizing full, complete forgiveness. And then, like I said just a moment ago, if you did get your forgiveness thing done, with the first round, and you had this balance to pay off, like I said, sit tight, don't do anything with that. SBA will make you whole by funneling the payment directly from SBA to the bank to pay off your loan. So don't touch that loan, okay? Next question, is the simplified forgiveness application for the PPP-1 as well, or only the PPP-2? I believe the answer to that, again, that is for loans 150 and below, and I believe that is going forward as of today. In other words, it doesn't matter if it's, first round or second round. Right, Karen?
Correct. And the forgiveness applications just came out yesterday, so they are on our website if anybody after this session wants to pull them up and see what they asked for, feel free.
There
is a box if you're first round or second round to check off on the forgiveness application.
Right, and again, I guess the website to commit to memory is easy, sba.gov/PPP. You should check with that pretty often, because in addition to, this is just the rollout that we're doing right now for the PPP program. So we're populating with the forms as they come through, and probably a set of FAQs too as they get assembled. So bookmark that and check it often for any questions you might have. Here's another question. After the bank submits the PPP application for the second round, what is the estimated time before SBA approval and funding? Actually, well, SBA isn't the one that funds it. It's the bank that funds that. But any thoughts on that? After the bank submits the PPP application for the second round, what is the estimated time for SBA approval?
I believe it's the same 90 days, Mike, for SBA, up to 90 days. Wait, this is for forgiveness. No, not forgiveness. This is, they're submitting a new PPP a new loan application now. So basically the borrower submits the application to the bank submits to SBA. But I believe what's happening now, instead of getting an automatic number assigned via E-Tran last time around, this time there is a lapse where the SBA is delaying it slightly to guard it as a fraud prevention mechanism. Right, Mike. That's correct.
Yeah.
They will not, but I'm not thinking it's going to be days on end, but there will be a lag, correct?
Yeah, I suspect a day or two perhaps. Walter, what do you think?
So what'll end up happening is once the lender transmits the loan information to the SBA will issue a loan number. And then once SBA issues that loan number, just be patient. Once SBA issues that loan number, then the lender has 10 days to fund it. So whenever, but we're not really I can't really give you a timeline how long it's going to take SBA
That's
on
good.
that side.
Good
Yeah.
point.
Yeah, okay, so a little bit of a lag for SBA to do its due diligence and fraud prevention. I would say a day or two perhaps, and then the bank has up to 10 days within which to disperse. Okay, thanks, Walter. Next question, are you or your colleagues willing to be a speaker and present this information to community groups? Perry, how about you write to us at nc@sba.gov, and we can see about entertaining that request. I will say SBA is not a big office. So, there's only so many of these that we can do. I would say keep a lookout, sign up for our Gov Delivery newsletter for future announcement, and you can have your community groups join up for us. But, you're welcome to write us anyway if you have a specific group in mind. Perry, thank you for that question. Next question is, what is the deadline of the first draw PPP loan to gain forgiveness? And are we working with our provider to complete this process?
Which for the bank to which deadline are they asking, I guess, is what
Yeah, their deadline is, what is the deadline of the first draw PPP loan to gain forgiveness? In other words, what is the deadline for them to submit their application for forgiveness? Well, it depends on when they, what covered period they choose, right? And then they have a certain, right?
Yes, and that's kind of a tricky situation because what happens is if the applicant once 10 months is up from after, how did I get all this echo going on? Okay, maybe that's better. Okay, so there's 10 months from after their covered period is over, and if the applicant has not submitted a forgiveness application after 10 months, they will be required to start making P&I payments on the balance because that is a loan that's sitting on the books with that financial institution. They technically have the full term of their loan to apply. So they could have a 2-year term or a 5-year term on their first PPP loan. Because there was depending on when the loan was approved, all the loans before June 5th, 2 years, after June 5th, 5-year term. But there's very, very few people or applicants that are going to want to go over that 10 months because they're not going to want to start. I mean, most folks do not want to start making that P&I payment if, in fact, they can get the loan forgiven. And as long as your application has been submitted, and then that 10 months could occur, you're fine. You're not going to be required then to make a payment because your forgiveness application's been submitted.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you. Next question. The follow-up, the second part of his question is, are we working with our provider to complete this process? Yes, you will be working with your lender to complete the forgiveness process. You will not be submitting anything to SBA directly. And that's a very good point. I mean, y'all don't submit any forms to SBA, whether it's an application or a forgiveness. You apply directly with your bank of account. Very important point. We, our fax machine got clogged up with all kinds of applications. I can attest to that. And we don't want to see that happen because we don't want you to miss out on the opportunity. So please apply through a lender. And I talked about some of those avenues earlier in the presentation. Okay, next question. For those who have received an EIDL previously, can they apply for a second EIDL? As far as we know, the answer is no to that question. As of now, there may be some guidance on that, but if there is, those regulations have not been announced. You can go to sba.gov/coronavirus relief. So sba.gov/coronavirus relief. And actually, you can find out about PPP and EIDL on those websites, but click the icon with EIDL and bookmark that if you want to be kept up to date on any goings on about that. And chances are, if there are any major changes to the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, we'll get the word out to you by means of our e-newsletter, which I would encourage you to sign up for. Okay, Next question. Clarify what transportation means. What is included? That will be like gas expenses. What other things, Walter? Do you remember? Transportation costs? You're on mute.
You're muted.
We now just recently there's the targeted IDL advance that's on our SBA website. There's further information on that, so that's just relatively new. Things are changing significantly. So the targeted there's a targeted EIDL advance, and you can go on to what ends up happening. SBA is going to reach out to those applicants that qualify for that. That recently just came out. It is on our website. On the SBA website, you just have to scroll down a little bit, because when you first see the website, when you see the idle advance, it's called, there is no more idle advance, but this is actually being called a targeted idle advance, and it is on our website. And the SBA is going to reach out to those businesses that qualify for that. You don't have to reapply for that, so just stay tuned for that. The gist of the program is they have to show and confirm at least 30% reductions, and it's got to be it's got to be on or before December 27th, and it's for qualified people.
Yeah. Maybe we can save that for an idle session that we can plan with SBTDC later. But Walter, what I was asking you is transportation expenses. What's included in that?
The transportation expenses are, you're like, if you're putting gas on for your vehicles to a certain extent, that type of situation. And additionally, if you had to make certain payments, payments that they use for like vehicle registrations and things of that nature, that's on the transportation expenses.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Now, next question. Excuse me. I am a partner in an LLC. I receive my salary as a guarantee payment, not a payroll. Can I consider my salary this in the calculation for 2.5 times? So let me read that again. So I'm a partner in an LLC. I receive my salary as guarantee payment. It's not on payroll. Can I consider my salary this in the Can I consider my salary in this in the calculation of 2.5 times?
The partnership incomes would be associated. What SBA is considering partnership incomes is on the tax form 1065 on your K1s. That's what we would consider partner income. So that's how we would treat that. Yeah. But really, just talk to your lender.
Yeah. Isn't there also, for all payroll costs, isn't there the restriction of only up to 100,000?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, so in other words, if your guaranteed income is 200,000, lucky you, you can only, can I work for you? You can only have up to 100,000 of that counted. So.
Correct.
Okay, so next question. Oh shoot, y'all, I think I lost my place because of how this box, here we go. I took my PPP forgiveness application to the lender, and they said they don't receive them and that I should upload it to the website. Please advise. Okay. Oh, I see. Yeah, that's for lenders that aren't receiving paper applications.
They're all doing it electronic.
No lenders, yeah. So that's fine.
And most lenders, most lenders have their, they have their own portal for the borrower to go to. Correct. Yeah,
and that should be fine. And usually they're, compliant with security protocols and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. If you're with a lending institution. Next one, what happens if an employee separates from the company post first round forgiveness and position is not filled pre-second round application? Oh, I see. So I would think you just have a lower payroll, right, to contend with your current PPP application.
Correct.
Right? That would be well, that wouldn't factor in your 25% reduction because we're only looking at gross receipts, not expenses. So okay. For first-time applicant of PPP, do they still have to show 25%? No, that 25% reduction only applies to second draw. Okay. I have had at least one business say that they submitted a first round PPP loan. They never heard back. I've suggested they follow up with the lender, get a date without you. Yeah, that is true. You need to follow up directly with your lender that you applied for. SBA has no control over the paper flow between you and the lender. So yeah, by all means, I mean, bug them to say, hey, what happened to my application? Another question is, receive my small first draw PPP due to having only 4 employees. However, I need working capital. Is second PPP the best way to obtain working capital, which would be a much greater amount of funds than going by payroll with a small number of employees? Walter, what do you think? I see you.
No, the second PPP is only used for payroll. However, they may try to, you cannot use that. You may want to try to just go the avenue for a working capital loan, like a traditional funding source that we have, like a 7A loan. PPP is specifically for payroll, not working capital.
We have a lot of helpers in the background.
We sure do. Thank you, Walter. Yeah, has this webinar been recorded? If yes, how can I find it later? Bob, you want to chime in?
Yes, I'll cover that in our close wrap up, but it will be, it's being recorded, and both the recording and the slides will be available on our website.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. Okay, next question. I have, a little bit more down in the weeds again. I have an 1120 SK1 for 2019, but not yet completed these for 2020. How do I document the gross receipts for 2020? Spreadsheet okay? Yeah, I think, it kind of gets, I don't think just a mere spreadsheet is going to be okay. I mean, our rules were pretty specific as to what would be acceptable. And it sounds to me, Conrad, that you're looking at the whole year to compare 2019 versus 2020. And the only permissible avenue of reporting that, I believe, is by filling out your tax return forms for 2020 and comparing that to 2019. Again, I need to emphasize, you need not actually file your 2020 right now. Just make sure that whatever you're reporting to the bank is going to be exactly what you report to the IRS. So you can document your gross receipts that way. Next question.
Mike,
go. Yeah.
I would only add that, these are preferred loans being done by the lenders, and, lenders are going to have their own requirements also, I'm sure, on what they're comfortable with to show that 25% reduction. So in a situation like you just asked, I would definitely work with your lender also to be sure you're doing what's going to work best.
Okay, great. Yeah, lightning round. We've got about 3 minutes left. Let's see if we can knock all these out real quickly. I have not submitted my forgivable application yet. So do I need to account for the idle events when I do submit the forgivable application? Don't account for it at all. Don't include it. Just leave the idle events outside of that and you'll be good to go. Since I'm trying to get information for others, I tried to walk through the lender match so that I could speak to the process, but stop going through it. But it seemed I was going to need to fill out a loan application in order to walk through the process. Can you tell us what the lender match process will yield? What the lender match process will yield is basically when you go into lender match, you fill out how much you want, what you wanted for, etc. Then all the lenders that have opted into receiving that application will have, I believe, 48 hours within which to opt in and say, yeah, I'm willing to talk to you. So it's not a loan application. It's just a means of matching you up with lenders that are interested in considering your application. So good question. We need to sort of watch our expectations about that. And then the next question is, can I email a couple more complex questions to nc@sba.gov? Yeah, we would first encourage you to take a look at sba.gov/PPP, because chances are in the interim final rule, chances are you'll probably find the answer to that. If not, then you may write to us. But we also need to kind of control the flow of information that's coming into us as well. Will this webinar be available? Yeah, Bob's going to talk about the webinar recording. What if a business has already been through the forgiveness and they can't pay back? And then I already talked about that. Your idle thing, you will be made whole as a result of the idle being deducted previously. So I talked about that a couple of times. Did you have to choose your cover period when applying for the first draw? I believe they did, right? For the first draw, they had to choose their cover period. Excuse me. I originally had me and one other employee in the beginning of opening the business in 2018. The other employee left the company June 2020. I have not hired back. I applied for the first PPP loan and used all the funds before said employee left. Will I be penalized?
No, they
right?
used all their funds during the covered period. I think they should be fine unless I misunderstood the question.
Yeah. Yeah. My bank, next question, my bank has sent me a letter saying changes are coming in February. Do you know what those are? I have no idea what your lender is referring to, but maybe if you wanted to clarify what that relates to. Okay. Is this presentation? Yeah, it's going to be recorded. Thanks for the great information, QA. You're very welcome. There was an SBA Q&A for people with forgiveness last October. Will those Q&As be updated? Yeah, I mentioned earlier that I believe, given the number of questions that are arising, it would not surprise me at all. In fact, my expectation would be that we would post some FAQs on the website, sba.gov/ppp. I would say give it a little while, because as these questions are coming in, SBA at the headquarters level will go ahead and consolidate that, I'm pretty sure. Okay, y'all, time is up. I'll pass to Bob.
Thank you all for attending the webinar. I would like to point out again the SBA Resource Partner slide. In addition to reaching out to the SBA office, you can reach out to all of these organizations, including the SBTDC and the SBTDC Business Resiliency Counselors. So feel free to contact us. Our next webinar is scheduled for next week, so watch for the announcement. The recording and slides will be posted on sbtdc.org, coronavirus webinars, so you'll get that link also. If you'd like to make a virtual appointment with the SBTDC Resiliency Counselor in your area, you can go to sbtdc.org/ERFC. And we'd like to thank the SBA and all of our partners and all of you who joined us for this webinar. Thank you so much.